I made this super cute bows and hearts cup using my Cricut, and it's way easier than it looks. I'm going to show you step by step how to make this even if you're a beginner. Keep watching and don't forget to subscribe. So I started by measuring my glass cup, and I measured around the cup and also how tall the cup is to make sure that the design we cut out matches perfectly with the cup dimensions. So I am in my Cricut design space, and this is my design. It's some bows and some hearts, and I made sure that the sizing aligns with the cup. One tip I have is to create a rectangle that is the same size as your cup and place it behind the design like this, and this gives you a better idea of what it will look like, as this is a cup wrap, and how it will sit on your cup. Now that I've seen what it will look like around the cup, I am ready to cut this design out. Another tip I have is to put the design more so in the middle of the mat and not right at the edges, just to make sure that your vinyl will be cut out properly, as sometimes if it's close to the edge, then it cuts out parts of the design and you won't get a clean cut or a full cut of your design. Now that we have finalized our placement on our mat in our Cricut design space, we will cut out the vinyl. And once again, I'm just measuring the vinyl to make sure that I am getting the right dimension, and I'm using the Oracle vinyl here, the permanent one in this beautiful pink color. So here I have my Cricut mat, and I will be placing the vinyl on here aligned with what I have in the Cricut design space, just to ensure that we have the smooth and clean cut. We really want to make sure that we are pressing the vinyl down and to make sure that it does stick to the mat properly, to ensure we have a clean cut, especially because the design is a little bit more intricate. So we are back in our Cricut design space, and the machine is just getting set up and connecting to the laptop. So now that the Cricut has connected to the laptop, we will be setting our base material to vinyl, and I always like to hit more pressure. Now that we have set our material and our pressure, we will just click the small arrow button on our Cricut and then hit the C once that starts to flash, and we will let the Cricut work its magic and do its cutting. This part does take a minute or two with this design, just because it is more intricate and it has a lot more little cuts in it. Now that the cut has been completed, we will click that little arrow again and take our mat from our Cricut machine. And now gently we will be pulling on our vinyl, and what I like to do is just turn the mat over to make sure that we are not ruining our cut, as the pieces are quite small, and this just makes it a lot easier to take off the vinyl without ruining our cut. Now I am just going in here and taking my weeding tool to start weeding this vinyl. Something that I like to do is start off with taking the little insides of the bows out and then work on taking off the entire layer of vinyl, because sometimes if we do the outer layer first, it is hard to get these little pieces out without ruining the design. And I will speed up this part just because it does take a little bit of time, but it will show you how I ended up weeding this vinyl for this cup. Here we have our bows and hearts vinyl fully weeded and ready to be placed on the cup. So I will be starting off by measuring our transfer tape to make sure that we have just enough to go around the cup and place this design seamlessly. So after I completed cutting out my transfer tape, I did peel it off and slowly I am putting it on the design. I always like to start in the middle and then spread it outwards to avoid any air bubbles. And it's really important that we press down really hard onto the transfer tape now, just to make sure that our design does transfer on easily and without ruining our design. Another thing that I like to do is to cut the transfer tape so that we have as little transfer tape as possible, just so that it doesn't start to overlap on our cup and eventually result in air bubbles or ruin the design. And that is just kind of what I'm doing here before applying it to our cup. Now, once again, just pressing down on our transfer tape to minimize any air bubbles that there may be. And now here we have our glass cup, and I always like to wipe it down with rubbing alcohol just to get rid of any dust or any little particles that we may not see. And this just ensures that we have a smooth transfer, minimal air bubbles, and a long lasting application of our vinyl. And we want to make sure that this completely dries before we start to transfer our vinyl over to this cup. Now we will just peel our transfer tape along with our design so that we can apply it to our glass cup. Now that the glass is completely dry, I will be applying this vinyl to the cup. And once again, I always like to start in the middle and then set the sides. So here I'm just taking my time with this just to make sure that we avoid any air bubbles. And once the middle is on, I like to lift the glass, and I always like to do one side first. And it's very important that we do not layer the other side right on top, because the vinyl will then stick to the transfer tape and not the cup, as you can see here as well. So what we're going to do is just lift the transfer tape on the left side a little bit and then transfer our vinyl on the right, just to make sure that there is no overlap. And then we will go in and firmly press down to make sure that our vinyl sticks to our cup. For this part, I like to use this tool, but I also like to use the force of my hands and my fingers, as I notice that I can get more of a firmer touch with this, and I can actually go over each little design by fully pressing down. Once the design is completely pressed onto the cup, I am just removing the transfer tape, and this has definitely have to be the most satisfying part. And this cup just turned out so cute. I am so obsessed, and that's it. This is how you make this hearts and bows cup, and I think it's just super cute for the spring and summer. If you want more Cricut tutorials and small business content, subscribe. And I'm also just figuring this as I go, as I am also a new small business owner.